and true.
Hey everybody, Larry, Fort Worth Memories Museum and Group. It's Tuesday, it's 10 o'clock, and it's Hometown Heroes. Rick and Mary have a special guest. Y'all got the show.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, Mary, and happy
Good
birthday
morning.
to Mary. Today's her
Thanks.
39th birthday.
39 and
29. You know, I just
29.
celebrate anniversaries of my 29th birthday, so I can't even do the math anymore on how many 29th birthdays I've had.
A few of them.
A few, just a few.
Yeah, today our guest, Larry, is a Vietnam gunship pilot, Milan, Georgia. And we met him last week at roll call.
Yes.
We don't usually tackle people
That
whenever they
quickly?
come to roll call and then all of a sudden have them on the podcast. But
Yeah, but you know, after our luncheons, we tend to go to Boomer Jacks on 820 in Lake Worth, and of course that we got to hear a little more of his story too. So, you know, it's really one. Most people when they come to their first luncheon don't come to Boomer Jacks with us. So, so it's kind of neat because we get to learn about you without having had the benefit of many months of hearing itsy bitsy pieces of the story, and now we have the whole hour to hear the story.
got the full dose.
Well,
Yes.
It's amazing, you know, just a couple of drinks will really put the bum's rush on you.
Yes, you ask Bill Henry, he'll tell you. That's the truth.
And for a long time, you didn't go around telling your story, did you?
No, sir, we did not. And I thank you for inviting me here. But yeah, for the longest time, and I think every Vietnam veteran went through that. Some of us have come out of it, but not everybody. And it's amazing still the people that are really hurting and just haven't gotten any help.
Was it kind of a healing process whenever you started sharing your story, or did it?
It's funny because, you know, years ago in World War I think the whole thing then was, it wasn't a veterans association, it was just a small appointment to Congress, and you handled veterans affairs, and they pretty much put their foot down and said, when you doughboys come home, we don't want to hear any of those stories about what happened in the trenches or anything like that. You just button it up and make like everything's sunny and go find a job. And that carried over to World War II, and then it got to the World War II children, the boomers. And boy, when it got to us, a lot of us just said, "Oh, the hell with that. We're gonna try to tell people what went on." And the best part about doing that is they made headway in PTSD and Agent Orange and things that were really affecting other veterans. When I got back, I was predisposed with to go to Fort Bliss, which is definitely a misnomer, and be a training
true.
officer there in what they called Logan Heights. And that Logan Heights was their version of Tigerland in Fort Polk. They were going to teach you everything you needed to know about the Army and basic training. When I got there, they were taking Logan Heights down stick by stick. It had been condemned. So I called infantry OCS and said, "Look, I'm at an air defense artillery base. I'm an infantry officer, and I just spent the last 12 months flying helicopter gunships. There's something wrong here." And the guy said, "You know, the only advice I can give you is look for a command that's open and take it. Find a job." So I said, all right. So I became I went to work for one of the battalions down there, the school battalion, and I was the adjutant. So when they had parades, I got to march out like a little tin soldier and call the battalion to attention. And so I had to practice that a little bit, make sure my voice could be heard for about 7 blocks. and so I could call them to attention. And then I took the first battery that opened up, and I couldn't understand why they called it by the alpha designator first and then the battery second. So it was a battery, and I said, you know, this is just not a battery. It's battery A. And so I switched it on them, and I had the general's driver. I had the recreational people.
Kind of like headquarters company or something.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. I had people that would walk in with their hat on sideways. Very strange outfit. But I ran that for a few months until I got my second presidential letter. This one was from Richard Nixon, saying to me that he no longer needed my services. And
You got one from Johnson saying that he needed them.
that he needed me, yeah. And I figured, well, you know, I've only got a high school education, so I'll go for it. And it was a good thing for me. It grew me up. It taught me a lot of things about life, and they also taught me how to fly helicopters too. So I mean, it wasn't wasted time.
Were you interested in aviation as a child? Or?
I always thought, you know, it was kind of cool to watch certain things. Like one of the shows we used to watch was Whirlybirds.
I remember that show. You
And
remember that show, Larry?
TH-13Ts.
Desi Lou Production.
Yeah, you're
They
right.
got their helicopters right out here at Bell.
Wow. And so anyway, it was kind of a natural when I went in, they said, you know, you did well on all your tests. What do you want to do? And I said, I'd like to fly helicopters. And they said, well, that school is full. And this was the bait and switch that went on with the recruiters. And they said, but we think we can get you into the flight school in a different way. And I said, all right, I'm listening. And they said, you have to go to officers candidate school first. And then you can become an officer and request flight school. And I said, so where do I go to school? And they said, well, we're going to send you to Fort Benning. It's a great place. It's the home of the infantry. And I thought, that's just my luck. I'm going to be an infantry officer.
At this point, you were still under the draft. You hadn't joined yet?
I
or
had not
just-
joined yet,
Okay.
right.
So
So-
did you have yeah, you said that you had a high school education. Had you gone to college at this point in time?
None
Wow.
whatsoever. I actually went in 1968, was inducted in 68, but I got my notice about 7 months earlier than the actual induction time. And the reason I had a delay was I was playing in a rock and roll band. At one time or another, I actually had a good tenor voice. And we had contractual obligations that kind of kept us going for a while I was trying to figure out a way out of not going to Vietnam. Our booking agent set me up with the Air Force. I went to the Air Force and promptly flunked their physical. And so they said, all right, when you go up to Philadelphia at the induction center, you take that physical that you flunked with you and show them. And of course I did, and there was a pretty big sergeant there, and he looked at it and said, this is the Air Force, boy. I mean, we're the Army. We'll take you.
Yeah, they'll take anybody, right?
Hey.
Yeah.
So I figured, well, I guess I'm not
Just
going home after this.
The
Yeah.
bar's just not set too high, huh?
Yeah.
And I
yeah.
wasn't really prepared to go anywhere, but next thing I knew, I was in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Wow.
At Fort Bragg. Just like
What
that.
kind of,
Man, change your life overnight.
Shave your head, change you get all these green looking fatigues and funny clothes to wear and big boots that aren't even broken in yet and hurt your feet.
Yeah, yep,
All that
yes, they do.
stuff.
it takes a while to break those boots in.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But you played in a band. Did you play in a band once you got in the military?
No, I didn't. I didn't even think to go for special services, and I thought, you know, I'm here. I'm gonna see what happens. Well, the more we got going with physical fitness and stuff like that, the more I really liked it. And I thought, this is great. You know, I don't know what everybody's so psyched out about. The only bad part was, of course, I was going to eventually go to Vietnam. But I figured if I'm going to go, I'll try to do that on my terms.
Yeah.
So I kept asking everybody about different schools and the like. And they sent me after basic to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and I became a comm center specialist, a 72 Bravo. And I had a top secret crypto clearance, which meant I could receive and disperse different messages. But they put me in this little box, which is smaller than this office, and said, this is where you'll be sending messages out, encrypted messages, and receiving messages as well. And I thought,
It's a pretty exciting job.
this is a tin box, or it looks like it's tin, thin gauge steel. And I asked them, I said, you know, if I get shot at, will the bullets go right through? And they said, no, they'll just come in one side and right around a little bit.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, you know, I need to do something else. This is not going to be any fun at all. So I applied to Officers Candidate School and went to Fort Benning, and even liked it even more. So at the end of graduation, guys were applying for Special Forces and Airborne Ranger and Airborne School, and I applied to flight school. And I was one of two out of the graduating class that went to flight school. But first, before I could go, I had to go somewhere else await my orders. I was accepted, but they couldn't fit me into class just yet. So I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana
I've been there.
for 2 months, and I became a training officer there. And man, I'm telling you, what a crazy place that was. So I got familiar with Leesville, I think it is,
Yeah.
Louisiana. And when my orders came, I couldn't leave fast enough for Mineral Wells, Texas.
Oh, exciting.
And I got there and started flying little not TH-13s, but T-55As. It's a Hughes model aircraft, and it's not too much bigger than a Mosquito. And they'd actually put 2 people in it, but it had enough power to carry 4 if you had them. It was just a 2-seater and a trainer, and I soloed, and the rest is history. Went on to Fort Rucker, Dothan, Alabama, home of the Boll Weevil, and went through.
That's where you move on up to the kind of helicopter you're going to be flying.
Yeah, you go to your secondary school in flight school to do your instrument training. And I did instrument training on the TH-13T. It's all hooded, so you can't see outside. You're just studying your instruments and trying to fly by instrumentation. That's a neat trick in a helicopter, because if you get upside down, you're going to die. But helicopters don't fly like airplanes. They fly more like a brick.
Especially whenever they're a gunship, right?
You got to control them. You got to control helicopters. Yeah.
That's
So-
what Dave Warwick just got, one of our former board members who still helps us in every way he did as a board member. He just got his helicopter license. He retired from the Air Force a few years ago, and just got his helicopter license. So
Yeah.
he's going down that route.
I don't know why you'd want to do that. But
He was EOD before when he was in the military, so that just speaks volumes, right? But control is something he enjoys.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. I brought you a present on that. It wasn't Morley Safer, but it was another guy off 60 Minutes wrote that up about helicopters. And
The
that's
difference between an airplane and
a helicopter. And that's absolutely true.
There's a lot of coordination flying a helicopter.
Well, you know, when they put you in a helicopter, you've got two pedals at the bottom here, then you've got a collective, and then you've got a cyclic. And so all of that, and depending upon how you use it, control, this is your power, and this is your direction, and this actually is your trim while you're flying. But when you get down to hover, then your pedals become your direction, and that works your tail rotor. And so you can turn the aircraft and hover, and you learn how to hover, and that's a whole different world, and all that kind of stuff. But with a gunship, I mean, you're talking about extra special stuff on the gunship, like ordnance out on the hard points. And we had miniguns, and when I first got there, we had a M79 launcher in the nose of one of the helicopters, and we also had the 50 calibers with the small rocket pods of 8. We had 2 rocket ships that were 24 rockets on either side, so a total of 48, and they were all 2.75 folding fin aerial rocket 10-pound explosives on the nose cone.
Whenever you're going through your training at Fort Rucker, then I guess you were gonna get trained for a gunship, or is that something you just had to learn?
No, that's OJT.
Okay.
When you get there, and there's a crazy story behind that, but the commander called us in, and it was the commanding officer, but they fancied themselves a commander. So in other words, like a wing commander, you were in charge of a assault helicopter company, and our commander or commanding officer was a major fixing to get his oak leaf cluster and become a light colonel. And he asked for, we had 4 lieutenants that were assigned to the 116th Assault Helicopter Company. And one of them went to maintenance, one of them went to the warehouse. So we had 2 left over, which was a lieutenant named Virtue, was his last name. I think his first name was Richard, I believe. And me, last name Georgia, like the state. So we went in to see the commander, and he said, "Gentlemen, I need a volunteer for the gunship platoon." He was already on his feet, and I thought, "Oh man, I lost it. He's volunteering." He stood up and said, "Sir, I'm married. I have children. I want to go home in one piece." I thought, wait a minute, this is going another way here. And I don't want to get involved with being in a gunship platoon. I know I'll get killed and die. And he said, "Okay, how about you?" And I said, "You got it." So I volunteered for the gunship platoon, which is called the Stingers in the 116th. It's a Hornet venue. So the slicks were Yellow Jackets and Wasps, and the gunship platoon was Stingers. And then started my trek at 21 years old on learning how to fly a helicopter gunship.
You think about all the training that we do now,
Right.
like with the F-16s going out to the range all the time, shooting their missiles, shooting their rockets, getting where they can hit stuff, and then you get out there and it's like you got to just learn to aim and fire at the right time.
Well, we did a lot of training too, but believe me, we caught a lot of people out there running around with weapons and shooting at us and this, that, and the other. We just kind of familiarized them with the Charlie model gunship.
With a gunship, at least you can shoot back.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah,
I kept thinking to
guys,
myself.
they were just,
Right, yeah.
After that guy told me a bullet was going to go right through that thin sheet metal for the signal corps, I figured I need something I can shoot back with and just wipe them out and not get killed.
Whenever you went to Vietnam and got put in the 116th Assault Helicopter Unit,
Right.
then did you start flying before you got the gunship, or was that your first?
No, that was
it. That was your assignment then. So
right, because I was a commissioned officer, and so what I was put in charge of was a platoon of about, I'm going to guess it'd say 15 warrant officers and about 30 enlisted men. The enlisted men were door gunners and crew chiefs, and the warrant officers were either aircraft commanders or pilots. I was a pilot when I first went into that platoon, and I felt like I should be because I didn't know what the heck I was doing with that piece of equipment.
Is the aircraft commander's the one that's the pilot and you're the
Kind of a
co-pilot?
senior
Yeah.
pilot, somebody who knows what to do with the piece of equipment, where to go, and once you get there, also fires the ordnance as well.
So you, on your first flights, then you were in the co-pilot seat
Right.
and not the commander of the ship.
I kind of set up the aircraft commander.
So that way you had some good
Yeah.
OJT, because it would be something to just say, go out there and start shooting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you learn a lot real quick. Believe me.
You get a
That's
lot
it.
of OJT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was good, and I was stationed at Kuchi for about 3.5 months, I think it was, and then they moved us to Chu Lai. At Kuchi, we supported the 25th Infantry Division, was our main infantry group that we supported, and then up in Chu Lai, we supported the Americal Division. So we
So
had
this was in 70 and 71.
70 and 71.
So it was post Tet Offensive, post a lot of other stuff. So
Right.
we've been over there several years fighting. So.
Yeah, we actually, believe it or not, and I do a lot of research on that and a lot of different programs that I present, but we actually had parachute jumps into Hanoi in 1944. Now, that wasn't the military, but it was the Office of Strategic Services. And we parachuted in there to help train the Vietnamese in guerrilla warfare against the Japanese. This is a horrible story because
teach that
it
snake.
came
Yeah,
back.
so they use it
It
against
came
us.
back to haunt
Right.
us. So we taught them exactly what we did against the British in our American Revolution. Hit and run warfare, and also lots and lots of different techniques that we used. It was a guy by the name of Edward Lansdale that parachuted in 1944 and started training the Vietnamese to fight the Japanese. They won. They threw the Japanese out of their country, but the French didn't want to give them independence. They only wanted to give them part of the country, and that was the mountainous regions. So the guy went by 17 different names before he settled on Ho Chi Minh, decided he was going to resist the French. He wanted his whole country, south and north. So they got into a little come to Jesus for about nine years. And the French, we actually started going in there to teach them how to use the weaponry that we had given them. Because if you remember, in World War II, the French just had a subterfuge type of group. They had a guerrilla group. They didn't really have an army. They had a potentate, so to speak, in de Gaulle, and he wore a military uniform, but they didn't have an army in World War II. So we had to help train them on our equipment to fight what was called the Viet Minh. And the Viet Minh dispatched them out of there after 9 years. And, oh gee, President de Gaulle used to be General de Gaulle, knew this fellow named Dwight David Eisenhower, used to be General Eisenhower, and was now our president, and asked him for some help. So Ike gave him some help, like $500 million worth of Lend-Lease equipment. And the French didn't know how to use it, so eventually we took over that plight and decided we would go in and fix them ourselves. So we, as Eisenhower did with NATO, we constructed CETO, or CETO, which was Southeastern Asia Treaty Organization. And the members were very similar to some of the NATO members as well. France decided they didn't want to join that because they had already been beaten. Britain was going to join that, but we told them we were going to fight that war with the Viet Minh like a conventional war, like we did the Germans. And that was a problem because these guys were fighting guerrilla warfare, which was ambush and hit and run. And they said, no, if you fight like you fought us in the American Revolution, you'll be able to beat them. Because after all, you taught them how to do that. And we said, no, we're going to fight it like a conventional war, like we fought the Nazis.
Didn't work, did it?
Yeah, it didn't work.
Didn't work at all. So anyway, that's a brief history of Vietnam.
Yeah, and we've had several Vietnam vets, and we've often talked about people just don't realize how early we actually were in Vietnam, and that this wasn't something that started when
Right.
the camera crews and everybody else made it look like it started. It started way earlier.
Way back.
In the
So
40s, yeah.
Yeah.
virtually about 31 years worth of time and money and equipment. And then finally we put combat troops in what, 63, I guess it was. They did the broadcast where they came up in a landing craft and dropped the gate and all ran off. And
Wasn't it always called a conflict?
Yes.
Yeah,
it
never-
was
It was
called
called
Vietnam
a-
it was
conflict.
never officially declared
Right.
a war.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I keep telling people I'm not really sure that's a good thing because a lot of our history books that are being published now, if it wasn't a war, that you're not in the history books. So the guys that were in Grenada, in Panama, in Vietnam, in Korea, and other skirmishes that we had, or insurgents that we had, or conflicts is what we called them, they just aren't even mentioned.
Because we were advisors, wasn't that the terminology?
Exactly. Yeah, we were technically advisors.
And that's, I think sometimes that kind of paves the way for us to get sucked in,
Yeah.
to a full-fledged war.
Oh, absolutely.
And then,
Well,
then
we
all of a
lost-
sudden, we're the ones that
Yeah,
are
we're
the
carrying the
lead.
load, right?
Yeah. Ooh, that sounds like an organization.
Yeah, it does,
Carry the
doesn't
load.
it? Yeah.
But I mean, you got to remember that it's 58,220 some people were in my generation, baby boomers, died over there, and no recognition. It's pretty rough.
Yeah.
You remember that white piece of paper every day it had killed, missing, every day, every news
Updated.
channel. Yeah.
And that was a big deal for
That was a
for
big deal.
Our propaganda machine, the body count of the Vietnamese or the North
Right.
Vietnamese.
That's what they let off the news with every day.
Well, that switched. We didn't go in there with that concept to begin with, but as soon as William Westmoreland was appointed commanding general of all the Allied forces in the area, we went to a war of attrition. War of attrition is what the Union tried to use against the Confederates in the Civil War, and they virtually had that because they did have a bigger population. And it's also what we used against the Nazis because we had a lot more people than Germany did. And so we decided we'd fight a war of attrition based on the age of the people, 18 to 35 or 18 to 40, the young men in North Vietnam, we outnumbered them at least 3 to 1.
You have any
So-
idea how many were killed
On the
North
other
Viet-
side?
on the other
Oh my
side?
God, millions.
Yeah, but they didn't
Yeah.
stick to that age group, did they?
Well, not only did they not stick to that, but they didn't stick to the men.
Right.
Because the people that were the deadliest ones in that war for North Vietnam were the women. No offense.
No, that's all right.
Right.
We don't mind being deadly sometimes.
But
They don't want to be on the wrong side of
and they
that.
caught us kind of off guard because they could lay in a 5-ton rut in the road and put their AK-47 in that rut because it would fire wet, and then pop up and kill a few of us, and then lay back down in that rut, and you'd never see them. They were so slight, and yet such good soldiers. And if we did see them, we thought, well, wait a minute, that's a woman. I can't shoot a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. Comes back to our upbringing that you protect the women. Men
Exactly.
protect the women.
Exactly.
Right.
Plus, they had
So-
tunneled underneath. They were all underneath.
We didn't know that.
Yeah,
And they were under our base in Cu Chi.
yeah. You
Some
could
of the-
hear them. You could hear them at night.
Some of the things that they did were just ingenious. Those tunnels actually started to exist when they started the campaigns against the French.
Yeah,
So you could land, you could bring in a whole bunch of troops and land, and there'd be nobody there. And 10 minutes later, there'd be 1,000 of them because
yeah.
they'd just
they were
come up,
underneath.
Very patient
come up
people,
from
right?
underground. Yeah,
Very patient.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't have anything against them, but I don't want to go back.
No, I don't
And
blame
there's,
you.
there's a lot of people that go back
Uh-huh.
and tour where their base used to be, or whatever the case might be. And they, from what I understand, our last station, we occupied the Republic of Korean barracks on the Gulf of Tonkin. Well, they of course moved all that out and ripped it down, and now I think they have a 5-star hotel on the same site as where our barracks were.
Wow. Yeah. So much better accommodations if they do go back to see it.
Yeah.
But I think for some folks it's just closure. It's just being able to go back there and not have to face, what so it's not the same. Maybe they change the mental picture in their head or something. I don't know. To me it would seem like it would bring back some memories that maybe I didn't want to have.
Exactly. My wife worked for a large pharmaceutical company, and she was promoted right up the line to become the general manager for the Pacific Rim region. And she would get trips that were overseas. We had just gone to one in Paris, and she asked me if I wanted to go to another trip with her. And I said, oh, great, yeah, where are we going? And she said, Ho Chi Minh City, which used to be Saigon when I was there. So I said, I don't think I better go with you on that one. And so she went by herself. And they even had disclaimers on the bottom of the receipts when they checked in that said, you are in a communist country. We reserve the right to search your room daily.
Right.
And she said every day she'd come back and try to find stuff again and put it back where it was when she left that morning.
Yeah. And I think that people assume that when you travel around the country or around the world that it's going to be like you're here in the U.S. and it's
Yeah.
not.
Nope.
Some of those countries, that's exactly right. They will do what they're going to do, and it doesn't matter. You don't have rights there the way you have rights here. And we sometimes forget that when we go to other countries.
Whenever you fly and you go on missions, typically were they just search and destroy or support? Or
We actually had, I call, say, 4 or 5 different missions. And our missions started when it was dawn, and they stopped when it was dusk. And so if we were doing a troop insertion, that of a bunch of company and infantry guys being put in to an area, that would usually last the better part of the day. Sometimes it would be over quickly, and we'd just put them in and they'd leave them there, for several weeks and maybe go back and get them later. So, but we would do troop insertion. That was one of our primary mission, and then we would do also spray mission escort, which was defoliation of the jungle.
So you got exposed to a lot of Agent Orange.
Exactly. And we would do special escort, which was if they had a very large, like a Jolly Green Giant helicopter that was picking up one of those tin boxes that I was supposed to work in, a comm center, and moving it from one area to another. We would escort that big aircraft. It was $20 or $30 million worth of aircraft they didn't want to get shot down. So we would escort them. Or we had special escort, which was Bob Hope's crew would come in every once in a while, and we'd escort them around, make sure they didn't get shot down. And the other escort was exceptional escort, and that was, we weren't supposed to ever take on passengers being in a gunship. There wasn't very much room in a gunship because of all the ammunition boxes we kept in the back with the door gunners. But by the same token, we weren't really geared to accommodate anybody on a Charlie model gunship. However, occasionally the Rangers and the Special Forces needed a quick move from one area to another. And they would come up and ask us if we could take them 2 clicks over or 10 clicks over and drop them off.
Whenever you were doing the troop insertions, you were just flying cover for other units?
Flying cover. The other units were going into the landing zone. We were up here circling around to make sure that they were okay and could get out of there alive. If the firefight broke out, then we switched to close in air support. And we were firing 2.75 folding fin aerial rockets.
So they were
10
firing back at
pounders.
you too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you were telling me one time you were the co-pilot, and the pilot went real low, and something happened and blew his
He
windshield
got a
out.
little bit too low, and some of the mud went up in the air, and I think it hit booby traps because when it got up in the air and came back to us, it was really traveling at a high rate of speed. It went through the plexiglass and knocked him out virtually of flying the aircraft. He was covered with mud, and the only thing I could see was the tip of his nose, but yet he was still trying to fly the aircraft.
But you had 2 windshields. I mean, you had
I
the pilot
showed you
and
that
co-pilot.
picture.
So
Yeah.
your windshield was it was
Untouched, didn't get me.
but you had to get him off the controls.
So
and-
the guys in the back came forward and hit the emergency release for the armored chair, and he went straight back and off the controls. Normally, if you did a control exchange, you would key your mic and say to the guy, "Okay, I've got it," and then he would look and make sure he saw you actually take the controls. He'd hear that transmission, and then he'd let go and say, "You've got it." But in the mudball case, it hit him so hard it moved his helmet back. So when I keyed the mic and said, "I've got it," he couldn't hear me. His helmet wasn't on his head. And he couldn't see me because he was covered with mud. So the only thing I could do was to wrestle him a little while until the guys in the back dumped his seat and got him off the controls.
Wow.
So
Bet that was scary.
we lived through it,
Woo!
but
you had some other close calls too, didn't you?
yeah, I mean, anytime you're going to be in a gunship with 4 guys that are trying to kill people, believe me, you're going to have some close calls. And we used to get shot up, and every time we come back, the maintenance guy, famous line, he would always say, "Why aren't you taking care of my aircraft?" And I said, "Since when is your aircraft? It's our aircraft." we're the gunships. He said, but look at all these bullet holes. I have to patch them.
Did you have to go in sometime and rescue people, or did you just...
Not in gunships.
Okay.
We tried not to ever do that. One of the big rules was never land a gunship in the combat zone. The only time I can remember we actually landed a gunship, actually we landed 2 of them, was when we were out doing search and destroy. That was one of our missions. And we saw these 4 guys dodging around the trees and the bushes, and they had packs on, and they were heavily laden. And we thought, well, they must be switching units or something. So we killed them, and then we thought, we're going to get the packs and stuff off of them and see what's going on. So we landed, threw one over each rocket pod, and brought them back into the fire base. And the interpreter had started going through their packs, and we discovered this ball with clear liquid in it. We kind of figured that was probably heroin or possibly cocaine. We weren't sure. We weren't going to try it. But these guys would shoot up sometimes before they would make an advance on your position. And you could blow an arm off or 2 arms off, and they'd still be coming. So we went through their packs, and we actually found different lists of people that we knew, like in our platoon, as to who was wanted by the VC and
Wow.
the NVA. And we had price tags on our head. Now you can imagine 21 guys finding their name on a list and them saying, well, how come you're worth more than me?
I was just going to ask that question.
Not concerned over the fact that I'm on a wanted list, but you can't be worth that more than I am. And so that's what we found in the back of their packs.
Wow.
You wouldn't have known that if you hadn't landed.
That's part of the reason why I didn't want to go back to Vietnam.
Yeah. They probably still have a wanted poster in their post office.
I don't
You never
know.
know. Don't want to
But
find
I know
out.
that guy went up to Korea. You probably remember that, about 2000, 2001, with his son on vacation. He went to North Korea, of all
Why?
places. They detained him for a good 6 or 8 months, and he was a veteran. And so, yeah, you can bet they were searching their files to see if he was on any of them.
And while you were in Vietnam, you received 2 Purple Hearts.
2 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, 2 Army Commendation Medals.
What were the Bronze Stars for?
Just achievement and meritorious service, but nothing special. They weren't with
You were
a
over
V.
there, that's pretty special.
They weren't with a V, which
Yeah.
is valorous.
And the Purple Hearts?
Took the guy was actually shooting at us and hit the door frame, and the piece of the door frame broke off and lodged in my right ankle. And then when I moved over to left seat as aircraft commander, we had some bullets coming up through the radios, and there was a piece that broke off and lodged in my right knee. Both of those actually grew out of my body.
Did they really? I guess shrapnel.
Fell on the floor. Yeah.
So while you were doing your job, you probably saw a lot of our guys that got killed.
The guys on the ground, I mean, they really took a beating. We had some fellas in the Laotian insertions, Lamsum 719.
Did you do some
That-
of those insertions? Did you?
Yeah, I was there for that. I was there for the Cambodian insertions as well, that we
weren't
wouldn't
there?
admit we were there. But we actually had a couple of helicopters just completely blown out of the sky. And I mean, they were there one minute, the next it was just a fireball and gone. Yeah.
Did you lose some of your close friends while you were there?
I lost one crew chief in our company while I was there, and that was my whole thought. Was I wasn't all that keen on whether or not I got an award or anything like that, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody that I could went home whole, that they didn't lose an arm or leg or anything like that. And I was pretty lucky, with the exception of one crew chief named Kenny Koch. We lost him while I was over there. I cried like a baby.
And it probably kept coming back.
He and I were pretty close. He was from Jersey City, New Jersey, which is really right across from Manhattan, across the Hudson River. He was a Yankees fan and a New York Giants fan. So was I, growing up in Wilmington, Delaware. And he was a tackle on his high school football team. He had extended, I think, 3 times
Wow.
before I got over there. Every extension was 6 more months. He was collecting combat pay, flight pay, and his regular pay for being a specialist fifth class. And his intentions were to build his own home, to buy his favorite car, and marry his best girl. So he figured the longer he could stay there, the more money he could put together to do that with. And I'm sorry to say it didn't work.
He got killed on a mission, man.
He did get killed on a mission, and we still, to this day, think it was an ambush for that particular, the tail number was 183. And they knew that that was Kenny's ship by the lists that we discovered. And a little guy named Al Acapulco was flying that ship at the time. They got in a crossfire with 51 calibers. And it took a bullet that went up through the bottom of the aircraft, through his seat, and transverse him.
Wow.
And hit every major organ it came in contact with. So he laid in the hospital for probably about 5 or 6 days before he passed. He couldn't have been, that couldn't have been a fun time. But October 3rd, 1970 is when we lost Kenny. I talk about him a lot in some of the Memorial Day things that I do for Trophy Club.
Wow.
And he's definitely missed. So,
And his whole life in front of him in a moment.
He was in his early 20s, like
Yeah.
all of us were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, we look at young people today and you talk about you were, 21 when you went to Vietnam. I mean, these guys are in their 20s, they're in their, late teens.
Right.
And we look at young people today and they're not ready to figure life out at that age. And it's a little bit scary. And I often wonder, if they had to, if they got put in that position, would they rise to the challenge and we just don't see it? Or would they not be able to because they've been in comfort for so long that they don't understand not being comfortable? And, how would it, and I would hope and pray that they would step up and do what they needed to do, because otherwise all of us, we know we will step in and fill the gap,
Right.
but we're not in the kind of shape that we need to be in to do that as well as we should.
Yeah.
But we really need the young people to start, thinking that way. I had 2 16-year-olds that wanted to meet Don Graves, and we had lunch with them yesterday. And you don't find that many that they get it, at 16 years old, and it just really makes you think.
Yeah.
Really makes you think.
And whenever you're around the little ROTC high school, they aren't little, they're teenagers, but
Right.
you see a lot of them that they do get it.
Right.
And they're the ones that are going to be out there on the front line protecting our country. But you had quite a bit of responsibility when you were in Vietnam. You were captain then, whenever you.
I
Did you
didn't
get-
make captain until I was just fixing, ready to leave.
Okay. But you had
Vietnam.
you still had a whole platoon
Yeah.
under your command, so it wasn't just flying the helicopter, but you were having to take care of a lot of other duties too.
I did, but I mean, if you're going to take charge of a group like that, you're going to use your best people, and the ones that'll be able to help you, and that you can kind of spread that around. So we had a good group that was involved with us as far as the warrant officers as well.
Because
and
they
they-
had a lot. I mean,
they
they
were
took a lot
excellent
of
people.
responsibility too.
Yeah.
I flew with the 4th Platoon, 507th Air Ambulance, and all the warrant officers. They had their duties, and then the captain he had his duty, and
Right.
it was a good group of people. So
I was in charge of the platoon for probably a good 6 or 8 months, and then they brought in a captain who had been doing special duty with the 25th Infantry Division, and he took over the command. And so when I left, I wasn't really in charge of that platoon for the last 2 months I was in country. Yeah.
and then now in life you go around telling your story, and you also tell some history lessons too about like Pearl Harbor and
I urge,
things like that.
yeah,
So-
absolutely. But I urge everybody that was over there to tell their story, because the guy sitting next to me is going to see it through a different set of eyes than I did, and it's going to sound different, even if it was the exact same mission. He picked up things that I didn't. He remembers things that I wouldn't, and so each story kind of helps you piece it all together as to what actually happened.
And that's what we try to do, is encourage the men and women that come to roll call, share their stories. Tell people about what you did and the experience. Because whenever you came back, it wasn't, I mean, you said that you started leaving off the fact that you were a veteran off your application because of the discrimination against Vietnam veterans. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
The best part about telling your story is it moves that from the memory bank to the frontal lobe, and after you've told your story, you realize that it's not all that bad, and you learn how to cope with it a little bit better. The people that hold that inside, I think, are the ones that die early.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
just eats away at them.
And,
so-
and that's the part of what we try to tell them when they come to the luncheons too, is that even if you're just sitting at the table with a group of other veterans and you start talking and you start sharing some stories, all of a sudden it doesn't look so scary. It's
Yeah.
that shedding that light, and then it's easier for you to tell more and more of the stories, and eventually those stories, it's like anything else, when you
the
shed
healing
light on them.
process.
Right, I think it is really healing. I agree that when they, I know there's a lot of folks out there that keep saying, I just don't want to talk about it. But really, it's that when you hold it in there for so long, I think it just really becomes hard for you to live with, because you're the only one living with it. You don't have any support to live with it.
Exactly.
And you're available to go tell your story to civic groups or
Yep.
other groups. So
Yeah.
if you want to get in touch with Milan, just contact
Yeah.
us, and we'll.
I have a couple
Get you all
people
hooked
right
up
now
and-
looking for some speakers.
I'm going to tell you, Rick, and if you don't mind, I'll correct you on that, because I've heard every pronunciation of my name you can possibly think
Did I
of,
get close?
but I use it Milan.
Milan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Milan.
It's kind of like this land is your land, this land is my land.
We got a question from a listener.
Yeah,
Did you know let me find it,
Oh, boy.
Philip O'Rear at Fort Walters?
you know, we get a lot of those questions, but you got to understand that even going through Vietnam, there were 2.7 million that were actually stationed in Vietnam or went through Vietnam during that conflict. And I'd hate to tell him and let him down, but I did not know him.
Well, there's probably some helicopter pilots that we know that might have known him. So.
Right, they
Yeah.
might, and that's another thing, we try to put them in contact with other, we have a lot of helicopter folks, whether they were
Oh, yeah.
maintenance or pilots or whatever the case might be. Have you been out to the commemorative Air Force summer camp and talked out there to the kids?
I'm going July the 11th.
Perfect,
Yeah.
perfect.
And I talked to Brenda
Mm-hmm.
Townsend, and the other day, and I said, you know, what exactly? She said, just come and tell them a story. And I said, okay.
Right,
That's all you got to do.
right,
So I'm going to wear my uniform and
perfect,
go
yeah,
out
and.
there.
And I think she might still have a few spots open if there's anybody out there listening that has any military experiences they want to share with some young people. And that's what they do in this. Every summer they do this.
Yeah.
And they open up this about 2-week block of time, and they have all these. So we have some of ours that regularly go out there now. And it's a really neat opportunity to share with those young people coming up.
Yep.
We appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you very
Our
much for
time-
inviting
our
me. I
time's,
really appreciate it.
Coming to an end, so
Yeah, and I have people that are requesting speakers now, so
So-
there's
we'll
lots of
certainly-
opportunities.
We'll certainly
raise
put you
my
on our
hand.
list.
Yeah, well,
We'd
that's
like
what I
to-
always ask. I ask people, I get requests, and if they tell me a certain era, then I go after that. But a lot of times they just want somebody that's willing to share their story. And so then I try to hook the tentacles up with the people in the community that need a speaker.
And we're glad that Terry Alger brought you
Yes.
and introduced you to us. Or,
Yeah.
you to us. Mary, we had a good week last week.
We did. Busy week. I was
Busy-
pretty tired.
A lot of miles. But we had a delightful time with the Tuskegee Airman, Dr. Eugene Richardson. We brought him here, had a great time. A lot of folks came to meet him here, and then we took him to lunch that day, and then the next day we went to Hope Farm, and he was in his element with those children, and that Dr. Richardson is so sincere and so genuine. Because a lot of people, they go to a facility like that and they're going to show them around, and it's just like, okay, you could tell every room we went into, they'd sit down and talk about how, they were happy to see them teaching the Bible. They were happy the way they were teaching them to read, because, they're so concerned about the children.
Yeah. They actually had 2 young people that were learning to do interviews, and they had Dr. Richardson sit in a chair and then one on either side of him, and they were practicing asking him questions, doing interviews. And there was another young man that had gone through there as a student who came back to work there, and he was teaching them now. And so he is giving them feedback as they're going, and they're taping it, and they're asking their questions. And Dr. Richardson and his wife were just phenomenal. And I heard from her. She emailed me. I need to get back with her. But she thanked us and said that the whole time she was here, that they never felt like a burden to anybody, and they really felt very welcome.
They certainly were.
That's great.
Yeah, and it was very nice. And their highlight of their trip was spending the night at the Drover and having dinner at the Cattleman's, and just seeing a little bit of what the West looked like.
Something that
Yeah.
impressed me about him,
Yeah.
he was a teacher and a principal, and didn't he say 2 of his students are now pilots?
Yeah,
And his son, we met his son.
And
And his son, yeah.
His son.
His son just retired from American.
Right.
yeah, but he retired from the Marines first.
First, yes.
So
But we went to the base in ASJRB on Thursday. It had a really good. I was impressed with the crowd. We
yeah,
had
it
a
was
good
almost
crowd
almost 2 hours we were
there.
there.
And he really, we got to hear everything. I mean, we heard bits and pieces. But
Right.
we had a good the skipper, Captain McLean, kind of was the interviewer and the narrator, and he did a great job.
Yes.
And learned so much about not only the Tuskegee Airmen, but all that the black African Americans went through. I mean, that was just the tip of the iceberg of what they were going through because they've been treated so horribly. But then to see the way that the Tuskegee Airmen had such an impact on changing things in our government and our military. So
Yeah, we
in
had
our
some
country.
folks there that were a little weepy.
Yeah.
Even a Gold Star wife was there and works on the base, and they were shedding some tears.
And
Yeah.
he was just so accommodating.
He's
talk-
real. I
To
mean,
talk to
he's-
people and sign autographs, and it was really a highlight of my life to meet him and spend that time with him. And I'm thankful that Roll Call was able to bring him down here with the help of American. And
Yeah, yeah.
And
Without
then-
American Airlines, we wouldn't have been able to do that, right? So that
right.
sponsorship with American really matters because that's how we're able to bring people like Dr. Richardson in. Because we can't afford to, we just don't have the budget to pay speakers or to pay people's flights and hotel. Unfortunately, his son lives within the DFW Metroplex, so we didn't have to worry about rooms and all that kind of stuff because we don't have the budget for that.
And this
So
month,
You
Yeah.
stay with his son?
or
He did,
That's great.
yeah.
in July, there's no roll call.
Right, no luncheon.
Next Tuesday's the 4th of July, so we'll take a day off from Hometown Heroes for our show
Yep.
then. But then we're looking forward to the October 15th clay shoot out at Defender Outdoors Clay Sporting Ranch, and we had a good turnout at boxing at Cowtown.
Real good.
A real good turnout.
Not a vacant seat. When you got a world champion sitting in another room
I know
because there's not
too many
enough
people.
seats.
I don't. How many world champions do we have there? About 3 or 4.
3 or 4.
And that's our,
And the younger boxers, the girls, it was really a great show. It's the
Nicole
best
and-
one we've ever had.
Well, I think so too. Those boxers, they boxed together back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and they don't see each other very often. So whenever they get together, they're trying to catch up because many of them had fought together or fought against each other on the same teams. And then we have Paul Reyes. I'm excited because Paul's such a good guy, and every time I see him, I try to take pictures while he's wrapping the hands of these young boxers, and they have no idea of the legend that's wrapping their hands because he's worked for so many world.
Have you ever
champions.
seen those pictures I've got of him from Gorman's Ranch in the 60s?
Yeah.
He was a young guy. Well, I've got pictures of him in high school. He was a trainer in high school.
He's a good guy, and he's pretty quiet. But
I mentioned when Don got to speaking, first time Don Curry, wherever had him, he wouldn't say 2 words. Now you can't shut him up.
Exactly.
He tells everybody I was the first world champion from Fort Worth, and he was,
a good fighter.
well, they still say pound for pound, he was the best boxer ever built.
Yeah. We had a good time, and then we've got the birthday for Fort Worth.
July
Memories coming up.
29th, 10th
Right
birthday
at the
party.
point. So a lot of stuff happening.
Yep, been a busy, but Dr. Richardson that was the highlight of my career, really.
Yeah.
I can't wait till Philadelphia and Dallas play.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be ringing him up.
Yeah, did you got a bet on that one?
No, but they're Philadelphia fans.
Are they?
Mary, do you have any plans for your birthday?
No, I don't think so. We have a couple of plans with the whole family's getting together next week. So
Okay.
we'll spend a few days all together next week, all the kids and grandkids. And so it's a lot of fun, 15, 16 people all together. I can't even remember how many it is anymore. I think it's 16. But yeah, we'll all be together next
Well,
week.
If you're on social media, just go to Mary's Facebook page and wish her happy birthday today. She's a pretty special person. I mean, she
You're
And
is.
she's
kind.
just gone through a traumatic deal. My mother was in assisted living for a while, then we brought her home and then back, and that just takes a lot out of the entire family.
It does.
And really, the person is ready to go, and
Yeah.
it's just every day is just and then once it's over, you're still not finished. So, and then
Yeah.
it really
There's-
hits you.
You know, I was
So
talking today, and there's just a lot of stuff you got to work through. You know,
Yeah.
whenever you lose a parent like
Yeah,
that.
that's
So-
Yeah.
this past Friday after the roll call lunch. My husband doesn't ever go to the luncheons because he says that's my thing, and he doesn't ever want anyone to treat me differently, and he hates big crowds. But he usually will come to Boomer Jack's afterwards, but he hasn't done that in the last few months because he's been, taking
right,
care of his dad.
Yeah.
And he came because he knew that Bill Henry, who was also, you met Bill, Bill, who never wore his cavalry hat till we convinced him to tell his story over a few beers at Boomer Jack's. He knew there were several people that come out to Boomer Jack's after the lunch that are roll call members that really wanted to just give him a hug, and he wanted to be there, and it was really good for him because all of our folks wrapped their
Stepped
arms
up.
around him and just let him know that. And he said, before this happened, I didn't know that many people even cared about me. So
And then to be able to share with somebody that you've been through a similar experience.
right,
Because I was sitting there talking to him, and the guy next to us said, "Excuse me, I don't want to invade your conversation, but did you say your father had just died?" And Dave said, "Yes, he did." So my mother just died, and so he started telling us that story about her. So,
yeah,
but we just wish the best for your family as you go through
we
that.
appreciate it. Yeah,
And we wish you a happy birthday. And
Thanks.
Thank you for all you do for.
I made it another year.
I know. Thank you for all you do for our veterans and our military, and you're such a caring person and a great leader.
Thank you.
Just appreciate that. We appreciate you being here,
Yes, sir.
and we look forward to hearing more stories
Oh,
later.
anytime.
And hopefully you'll start coming to roll call every month.
I got a million of them.
Sounds like we need him back anyway because
We
he's
do.
got more to
I
tell.
know. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Larry. Thank you again for hosting us down here.
Yep.
And we appreciate you and all you do for our city and our county and for a lot of people.
Well-
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Hometown Heroes.
Have a great 4th.